Yeah, good day doesn't feel natural. I'm from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, but I will give you a good day. And but yeah, I'm from Pittsburgh, and I play in a band called Anti-Flag, and I play drums.
Anti-Flag's been around for 25, nearly 30 years. In that time, we've seen Republican, Democrat presidents. How has political music changed in that time?
It's interesting that political rock it comes and goes. It's a fashion. It is something that comes into the zeitgeist of the people and goes away, and in different territories it flows. And it's interesting because revolution in the same way flows through different countries and different cultures and things like that. And it's a contagion that definitely that passes through. So, but as in political rock, there's always an undercurrent of activism in punk rock, and it'll flare up, and there'll be more bands that are interested in it, and then it'll go away. But there's always this simmering underneath of punk rock activism, leftist activism that's going on, and that's the community that we came out of. The thing that I've always liked about activism and punk rock is it's the same skills of putting on a protest and a demonstration that it is to put on a rock show. Because when we were young, we put on rock shows. We hired out fire halls or basements or church basements or wherever we could get a space and put on a rock show. And that's the same skill set you need to say, hey, I don't like what's going on with Trump and his new cabinet picks, so we're going to have a demonstration about that, and we're going to take the streets back. So it's always interesting to me how those things are at the same time very different, but at the same time very similar.
You mentioned Trump. We are seeing a global shift to the right. Do you agree with the idea that we need political music now more than ever?
That's a fantasy that even my suburban mother or sister-in-law said to me. She said, well, when Trump gets elected, it'll be good for punk rock. And I'm like, yeah, that's a myth. I would much rather not have fucking Trump and his right-wing shenanigans and then have really shitty punk rock. Because there's always been activists, like I said, there's always been a basement community. There's always activist punk rock that's happened. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens in art. When Trump was elected, Justin and I went out and went to the demonstrations, and all the people who were there were the artists and the fuck-ups and weirdos. So they were definitely all coming together because they were like, holy shit, our world is going to change drastically. We need to be in the streets and both express our dissent, but also find community and other people who are fuck-ups and weirdos.
So no time for you to sit at home with a beer?
No. It's a busy time in the anti-flag world.
With the explosion of social media in the last 10 years, information is everywhere. So we have to spread a message and get your hands on good information. Have the left dropped the ball?
Well, it's not a question of dropping the ball. It's just the flow of how things go. Dominant cultures become very afraid of change. And we see this in Europe with the immigrants. We see the fear in the U.S. with immigration. Immigration always makes a swing to the right because there's, I will say in our country, white men are afraid of everybody who isn't a white man, and they all think that something is going to be taken away from them, and that is really fucked up, and that makes everything swing to the right. And yeah, right now it's a mess. It can get much worse. I'm very afraid of how things go. If we have a few more terrorist attacks, it's going to get ugly with demagogues like Trump in office. It's going to be a shit show.
What do you reckon about that argument? This is actually an anti-establishment vote.
It absolutely is. That's the same thing with Brexit. But the problem is, it is anti-establishment, but it's anti-establishment from a right-wing populist point of view. And the right-wing populism, this is the first time I've seen right-wing populism in the States. It's always been left-wing populism. And right-wing populism is really scary because it brings out all that simmering racism, that simmering xenophobia, that simmering homophobia, and brings it up to the surface. And you see, we're looking at ourselves as Americans in the face, and it's a fucked up world. But yeah, it's an anti-establishment vote, and that's true. But it also brings in this very ugly part of our culture.
I don't know how much you know about Australian politics, but a lot of us got caught up in this idea of Kevin 07, so this Prime Minister with a female deputy who's going to come in and change things for climate change, for asylum seekers, kind of dropped the ball, made us feel a little bit let down, a little bit naive.
Okay.
And that kind of came at the same time as the advent of Obama. How do you not lose heart when that kind of thing happens?
Well, the lucky thing is that since we've been around and we've been activists since before we were in the band, so we've seen these things, we've seen how it goes, and so we know that it's going to come back. We don't know how bad it's going to get before it swings back, but we also know that the way of stopping it from getting completely out of hand and ridiculous is to be in the streets and to be protesting, because the right wing can always, they say ridiculous things, but if there's 200,000 people in the streets, it's very hard for them to do those ridiculous things. And that's where our power lies. In the right, they have these media conglomerations that they send out this fake news and make all these ridiculous things, but the left, all we have is boots in the streets and bringing people together. So that has traditionally been our power, and we're going to have to utilize it now, because they can't kill all of us. That's the moral of the story, is they can never kill all of us.
So you've been asked a million times what the band name Anti-Flag means, but it's an interesting one for Australia at a time when we're having a conversation about changing our flag, getting rid of the Union Jack and our links to the monarchy, and even changing our national day to recognise that this land wasn't settled by white people but invaded them.
It's interesting because in the States, the flag is such a ridiculous symbol, and people are all about it, and you can't say anything against the flag. But in London, it's the, God Save the Queen. It's a similar thing. In Australia, I'm sure you have something that is, because it's not the flag, because people are willing to throw the flag under the bus and get rid of it. But there's got to be something in Australia that is like, what we say is they wrap themselves in the flag. When a politician says, we want to send all you young people out to go kill other young people, they stand in front of all these flags, and because they have that image, people think, oh, they must be speaking the truth, that we have to follow along. In Australia, I'm sure you have something as well, whether if it's not the flag or if it's a flag or not. But I am all in favor of throwing off and getting rid of the symbols and recreating the culture, because those symbols mean nothing. They're fabric, they're cloth. Most of them are made in China, and if you can get rid of those symbols, you can redefine the culture and the country in the new way. And wouldn't it be awesome if you got a new flag and redefined Australia as a place that welcomed the refugees who have been displaced from other places? Because of these refugees are not created out of thin air. These refugees are created because of climate change. They're created because of warfare and the money that's being made by selling weaponry and imperialism. These things are the things in the oil and all these other things. These are the things that we're exporting. The U.S. majority, but Australia as well. It's all all these Western countries are creating these refugees, and then we say, no, we don't want you to come into our pristine land of freedom and democracy, which is all crap. But yeah, so it would be, I'm all in favor of rebranding or redefining a culture in a more compassionate and humanitarian way.
So you're massively influential as a lifelong fan of political music. This is a big deal for me to be sitting here with you today. But who are some of your big influences? I mean, you've toured with Rage Against the Machine, No Effects.
Well, we did Rage Against the Machine. Actually, we did Rage Against the Machine in Australia, so that was pretty amazing. I'm a huge fan of Billy Bragg. So he's a UK folk rock activist and musician. But some of our heroes that are the guys that we grew up with, because Pittsburgh was a very leftist punk rock community and activist community, and bands like Submachine and Osrotten and the Bad Genes were just bands in our town that taught us how to tour, and those were some of the people who really influenced us to be activists and musicians.
Writing political music isn't exactly a surefire way to massive market success. How have you kept it going all these years? And I guess you guys actually have had a lot of interest from major labels.
The reason, it's funny because you say it as it's not a good thing, but the only reason why I'm still here, and I think the other guys are still here, is because we believe in the cause of something better than, if we were just playing dick rock, it's just not interesting. There's a million other dick rock bands out there who are going to do it as better or the same as we can. The activist end of things, to go to a city and to have Sea Shepherd there, to have Amnesty International there, to talk to the next generation of activists who are there at the show and saying, I didn't know about what vegetarian and veganism was. I didn't know about these things. I didn't know about refugees and why we need to allow people into our countries. That makes it interesting to me. If it was just playing music, it would be boring, and I would have been gone 25 years ago. So it may not be financially lucrative for us, but spiritually and emotionally it's very lucrative for us.
You mentioned veganism, vegetarianism. If someone can't make all those changes at once, what's your advice to them?
This goes for all activism, whether it's activism within your food choices, it's activism. You make the choices every day that you think are in your best interest and that it makes sense to you. There's no, if today you want to have a steak, and that's your choice, you should go do it. It's much more apparent in the world of activism, where there's some people who can go and get arrested and chain themselves to a tree and stay there for 6 months. And then there's other people who have jobs and families and lives, and they're like, I'm just going to be here and be counted as being in one of the dissenters, and then I got to go home to my family. So all of those people are very important in the path to these changes. We need to have a lot of moms and dads who have kids, and then we need to have the crazy fuckers who are willing to chain themselves to things. And through all that, that's what we need. So at the same time, we need the complete vegans, and then we need the guys who say, you know what, on Tuesdays I'm just not going to eat meat on Tuesdays, and that's amazing as well.
Great. Well, thanks for talking to Party Political.
Thank you.
Cheers. Thanks, man. All good.
Did that work?
Yeah, that's
we get
great.
all that?
Yeah, that's cool.
Awesome.